Retirement has a way of revealing the truth about money. For years, a person can keep going. The paycheck arrives, the bills are paid, the car starts in the morning, the house is still standing, and life appears to be under control. There may be stress, but it is familiar stress. There may be debt, but the payments are being made. And as long as work continues, many households tell themselves there will be time to catch up later. Then later begins to arrive. The body gets older. The working years begin to feel shorter. The word retirement stops sounding like a distant idea and starts sounding like a question. And for many middle-class Americans, the question is not just, how much have I saved? It is much quieter and much heavier. Will the bills retire when I do? That is the part of retirement people rarely talk about out loud. The dream is simple enough: slower mornings, less pressure, more time with family, maybe a little peace after decades of responsibility. But sometimes retirement does not arrive as peace. Sometimes it arrives with a mortgage payment still waiting, a car payment still due, a credit card balance still breathing, insurance bills, medical costs, grocery prices, utility bills, and old obligations that do not care whether a person is still working full-time. And when those bills remain, retirement can feel less like freedom and more like a new stage of the same pressure. According to the 2026 Retirement Confidence Survey from EBRI and Greenwald Research, retirement confidence declined, with concerns about inflation, debt, healthcare costs, housing expenses, Social Security, and Medicare weighing on both workers and retirees. Only 64% of Americans said they felt confident they had enough money to live comfortably throughout retirement. That number matters because it gives shape to a fear many people carry privately. The fear is not always about wanting luxury. It is not always about wanting a perfect retirement. For many people, it is simply the fear of growing older while still feeling financially unfinished. And that fear becomes more real when debt follows people into later life. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported that total U.S. household debt reached $18.8 trillion in the first quarter of 2026. Mortgage balances totaled $13.19 trillion at the end of March 2026. Auto loan balances reached $1.69 trillion. Credit card balances stood at $1.25 trillion. Numbers like that can sound distant. They belong to reports, agencies, charts, and headlines. But the life behind those numbers is much more ordinary. It is a retirement statement lying beside a credit card bill. It is a couple in their late 50s looking at the mortgage and wondering if the date on the calendar is moving faster than the balance. It is a person in their early 60s making a car payment and realizing that transportation, like everything else, still has a monthly price. The visible problem is not hard to find. The bills do not stop just because someone gets older. Housing remains, transportation remains, food remains, healthcare remains, insurance remains. Debt remains if it has not been paid down. And for many families, these are not careless expenses, they are the structure of ordinary life. In 2024, average U.S. household spending was $78,535, around $6,545 per month. Housing and transportation accounted for more than 50% of household spending. That is important because it shows how much of a household's financial life can be tied up in the basics before anything extra is considered. A mortgage may represent stability, a car may represent independence. A credit card may have covered a medical bill, a home repair, or a season when the numbers simply did not work. None of this has to mean failure. Many people borrow because life gives them few clean choices. But the real problem is not always the bill itself. The real problem is what happens when the bill stays long enough to follow someone into retirement. A payment that feels manageable at 45 can feel different at 62. A balance that feels temporary at 50 can feel much heavier at 66. A mortgage that once felt like part of building a life can begin to feel like pressure when the paycheck becomes smaller, fixed, or less certain. This is where the hidden trap begins. Monthly payments have a strange way of making large costs feel smaller. They change the question from, "What will this really cost me over time?" to, "Can I handle this amount each month?" That question sounds reasonable. It may even sound responsible. And sometimes it is the only question a household feels able to ask. But over many years, that way of thinking can quietly crowd the future. A car is judged by the payment. A credit card is judged by the minimum. A medical bill becomes less frightening when it is divided into pieces. A store card feels manageable because the monthly amount does not look large. A home equity balance may feel acceptable because the payment fits the budget for now. What makes this dangerous is that it feels normal. And when normal payments become permanent, retirement starts to look different. The issue is no longer only income, it is how much of that income is already promised. According to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau credit card market data, general purpose credit card APRs averaged 25.2% in 2024, while private label card APRs averaged 31.3%. Consumers were assessed $160 billion in credit card interest charges in 2024, up from $105 billion in 2022. Interest has a quiet way of keeping the past alive. A balance may have begun with a repair, a doctor's bill, groceries, gas, or a difficult month. But long after the original reason is forgotten, the payment remains. It returns in the mail or on the screen, month after month, asking for another piece of the future. For older Americans, this can be especially painful because the balances are not always tied to luxury. AARP reported in 2025 that nearly half, 47%, of adults age 50 and older who are carrying credit card debt had used credit cards for basic living expenses they did not have enough money to cover. AARP also found that 17% of adults age 50 and older with credit card debt relied on cards for basic expenses every month over the prior year. That changes the story. This is not just about overspending. Sometimes debt is groceries, utilities, gas, medicine, a repair that could not be delayed, a family need that arrived at the wrong time. In those moments, debt may feel like a bridge. But if the bridge never ends, it can become part of the trap. Bankrate reported that 29% of Americans had more credit card debt than emergency savings heading into 2026. That means for many households, one emergency does not simply interrupt progress. It can create a new balance, and when that happens close to retirement, the emotional weight is different. There may be less time to recover, less energy to start over, less room to be wrong. This is where many households begin to lose control without noticing. Not because they stop caring, not because they stop working, but because the bills keep returning, and each one seems reasonable by itself. The car payment is reasonable, the mortgage is reasonable, the credit card minimum is reasonable, the insurance premium is necessary, the medical bill is unavoidable, the groceries are not optional. But together, they can create a life where almost every dollar already has a destination before it arrives. While someone is working, that pressure may be survivable. There may be overtime, a raise, a bonus, another year to catch up, the hope that things will ease later. But retirement changes the math and the mood. In January 2026, the Social Security Administration estimated the average monthly benefit for all retired workers after the 2026 cost of living adjustment at $2,071. Social Security can be an important part of retirement income for many households, but it does not erase the rest of the budget. Housing costs still exist, food still has to be bought, insurance and health care still matter, debt payments still arrive. And this is when the fear becomes very personal. A person may have worked for 35 or 40 years and still wonder whether retirement will feel safe. A couple may have paid bills faithfully for decades and still ask whether the mortgage will outlast the paycheck. Someone may look at a credit card balance in their 60s and feel shame, even if that balance came from medical expenses, repairs, or basic living costs. The danger is not only the amount owed, it is the feeling that time is getting shorter while the obligations remain. The Federal Reserve's 2025 Household Well-Being Report found that price increases remain the most common financial concern. That matters because rising prices make old debt harder to carry. When groceries, insurance, utilities, and medical costs rise, there is less space left to reduce balances or rebuild savings. A household may pay down part of a card, then use it again when something breaks. It may build a small cushion, then watch it disappear after one medical bill or one repair. The trap repeats itself quietly. This is why retirement debt is so difficult to talk about. It often hides inside a life that looks normal. A normal home, a normal car, a normal insurance bill, a normal credit card statement, a normal grocery receipt. Nothing looks dramatic from the outside, but inside, the household may feel a slow tightening. For Robert and Elaine, a fictional couple in their late 50s, retirement does not feel impossible, but it does feel uncertain. They have a mortgage, a car payment, credit card balances, insurance bills, and grocery costs that feel heavier than they used to. They are not living wildly, they are not trying to impress anyone. But the bills keep pulling the future closer and pushing peace farther away. For Karen, a fictional 64-year-old, the problem is a credit card balance created by medical expenses and home repairs. She makes the payment every month. She is responsible. She is trying. But the balance moves slowly, and the idea of retiring before the debt is gone feels like walking into a smaller room. For Michael, a fictional 51-year-old, the problem is not low effort. He works, he pays, he keeps going. But during expensive months, credit cards help cover groceries, utilities, insurance, and family costs. The balances do not feel dramatic at first. Then one day, he begins to wonder whether he is building retirement security or simply keeping up with payments. These stories are fictional, but the pattern is real. Debt that feels manageable during working years can feel much heavier when the future gets closer, and that is the uncomfortable truth. Retirement is not only about what a person owns. It is also about what still owns part of their income. A retirement account can sit beside a credit card balance. A Social Security benefit can arrive beside a mortgage bill. A pension or savings withdrawal can be weakened by car payments, insurance premiums, medical costs, and old obligations. On paper, the numbers may still function. But emotionally, the household may feel trapped. This does not mean everyone has to enter retirement debt-free. It does not mean a mortgage is always a mistake, or a car loan is always irresponsible, or a credit card balance is always proof of failure. Life is too human for rules that simple, but the question deserves to be asked before the future arrives. Which payments are likely to follow you into later life? Which obligations are truly temporary, and which ones have quietly become permanent? Which debts were created by necessity, and which were created because the monthly payment made the total cost easier to ignore? Which bills support stability, and which ones slowly take away breathing room? These questions are not meant to create fear, they are meant to create clarity, because shame keeps people silent, and silence makes financial pressure feel heavier than it already is. Many households carry these worries privately, believing they are the only ones who worked hard and still feel behind, but the data suggests they are not alone. Debt is widespread. Retirement confidence has weakened. Older adults are using credit cards for basic expenses. Many Americans have more credit card debt than emergency savings. Price increases remain a major concern. These are not isolated fears. They are part of the landscape many families are trying to cross. The deeper lesson is simple, but not easy to face. A calm retirement is shaped not only by how much money comes in, but by how much of that money is already promised before it arrives. That question can be uncomfortable because it touches pride, regret, fear, and time. But it can also be useful. It turns a vague worrying into something visible. It takes the feeling of being trapped and gives it a name. Will the bills retire when you do? There may not be an easy answer, but the question itself matters. It reminds us that retirement is not just an age, not just a date, not just an account balance. Retirement is a monthly reality, and in that reality, old payments still have power. So the warning is quiet, not loud. Be aware of the payments that feel harmless while income is still steady. Be honest about the balances that seem manageable only because work continues. Pay attention to the obligations that may still be waiting when later life begins, because the retirement debt trap rarely begins at retirement. It begins years earlier, when ordinary payments feel normal, when balances feel temporary, and when the future still feels far enough away to wait. Then one day, the future arrives, and if no one looked closely enough, the bills are still sitting there, waiting.